Coming to you live from Miami Shores, Florida, and Bruton, Alabama, I'm Rich Robinson, joined with Spinks Megginson, our chief weather analyst for Red Zone Weather. We're very excited to be bringing you this broadcast this evening, 8:05 here Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. in the Central Standard Time, which is where Spinks is. We'll get to Spinks in just a second, but before we do that, a little bit more information. Weather. We're very excited. A little bit more information here on Tropical Storm Erika. Erika, as of this hour, is 25 miles southeast of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. It's 45 miles per hour, maximum sustained winds. 1,008 millibars is its pressure. It's a storm that is weakening. It is about to go over the heavy mountains of Hispaniola, and for that we go to our own chief weather analyst, Spinks Megginson, to tell us more. Spinks, first of all, good to see you today. And tell the people at home what to expect.
Yeah, good to see you too, Rich. We are still watching Erika. However, Erika this evening is on life support. Yes, indeed. You see this big blob of thunderstorms. In fact, a recent burst of convection over the Dominican Republic. The center of the storm is actually right here. In this white circle with the black T inside it. That's where the National Hurricane Center has the center of Erika as of the 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time advisory issued moments ago. In that advisory, as Rich just mentioned, the Hurricane Center keeping the maximum sustained winds at 45, right around 50 miles per hour. Let's go ahead and zoom into Erika. I'm going to step off camera here and zoom into the storm. And what you're looking at, of course, this is the island of Hispaniola. This is Haiti on the western side of the island. And of course, this country is the Dominican Republic. The center of Erika is right in here. Of course, we're used to looking at black and white satellite imagery, but since the sun has set in this part of the world, we are now looking at the infrared satellite. And so when you see this gray area develop at the very end of the loop, those are very cold cloud tops, high thunderstorms, or high cloud tops, I should say, in the atmosphere. And what that means, under these cloud tops, very heavy rainfall happening right now in the southern part of the Dominican Republic. So what's happening here, this convection is actually over the center of Erika. In the past, say, 24 hours, this is the first time that convection has really fired over the center. In fact, yesterday, when we were doing this broadcast, if you see this red square here just off the side of your screen, that's where Erika was 24 hours ago right now, basically. So it's since moved to the west and drifted just a hair to the north, and ultimately the center is going to cross the coast of the Dominican Republic and move inland over these high mountains. In fact, let me go ahead and turn off the satellite just so you can get some idea of the mountainous terrain in this area. We'll zoom in, and you can really see the topography showing the variance here in elevation. In fact, this brown shading, very high mountains here, and that's likely going to rip the storm apart in the days ahead. As Rich and I have been talking about over the past several hours, there's a high chance that this storm may not survive its impact from the Dominican Republic, Rich. So good news for South Florida, not so good news for our friends down here in the Dominican. They are having very heavy rain, some potentially life-threatening situations setting up down there due to the rainfall with Erika.
Sure thing, Spinks. While we have you at that map that shows the topography of Hispaniola, once again, explain to our audience where the center of circulation is at this exact moment and how close it is to these highest mountains. Because if it does, for example, take a jaunt over towards Haiti instead of the Dominican Republic, the storm may fare better. Why don't you walk us through that a little bit?
Exactly, Rich. Yeah, let's go ahead and turn on the satellite here. And this is satellite imagery from a GOES satellite, geostationary orbiting environmental satellite orbiting above the Earth, looking down at these cloud tops, and the center is right here in this near this T, and that's the National Hurricane Center position. We had an Air Force Reserve reconnaissance aircraft fly out into the middle of this storm earlier today, and data from the Hurricane Center indicating that the center was loosely defined. When you have a tropical cyclone, you've got to have a closed, low-level circulation near the surface of the Earth. In other words, the clouds near, say, between 1 and 3,000 feet should be circular and closed off from the surrounding environment. And what they're saying is that the circulation with Erika is becoming very loosely defined, hard to find. And as this system continues moving over this mountainous terrain, particularly here in southern Haiti and the southern Dominican Republic, very high chance that low-level circulation may be ripped apart and Erika may become an open wave. Let's look at one angle of Erika that you probably haven't seen. So this is the NextRad weather radar data from San Juan, Puerto Rico. In fact, this red dot right here is exactly where the radar site is. And in most situations, radars have a good view about 125 miles out. This is an extended range product, about double the range, 248 nautical miles. And of course, where most of the rainfall is happening here in the southern part of the Dominican and Haiti, that's well out of range for this particular NextRad weather radar in Puerto Rico. However, you can see all of this rain even happening in the far eastern part of the Dominican. That's just a testament to what's actually going on under these clouds. The rainfall that you just saw on radar is happening over here in this orange and yellow area. So understand, under this red and gray shading, very heavy rainfall with the moisture slamming into the mountains, it's essentially acting like, the mountains that is, they're essentially acting like a sponge to get all of this moisture out. So very likely we will hear in the next few days of flooding in the southern Dominican, just a terrible situation that transpired over in Dominica. 12 confirmed fatalities, that's from the National Hurricane Center, Rich. And unfortunately, I think in the days ahead, especially if this moves over impoverished areas in Haiti, perhaps a humanitarian crisis about to unfold before our very eyes.
Well, let's hope not. But Spinks, while we're looking at the radar right behind you, we can see the storm continuing to move to the west. And that's an interesting thing because the National Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center, is saying that this storm is going to eventually move north. They've been saying that for a very long time. It is slowly doing so, but boy, it continues to move to the west. Something we talked about earlier off air is the potential that if it continues to move further to the west, not only will it have to contend with the mountains in Hispaniola, but then it will have to contend with the very steep terrain in Cuba. And if that happens, this storm probably has very little chance of surviving any sort of United States threat.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Rich. In fact, let's go ahead and look at that right now. What we'll do is zoom out on our satellite imagery here. And as Rich alluded to, the mountains here in southern Cuba out ahead of the storm are very high. In fact, of course, in recent years, we've heard about Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. That actually sits right here in this little inlet. And the mountains surrounding that region are enormously high, very comparable to the mountains on the island of Hispaniola. So as this storm continues moving off to the west-northwest, in fact, you see the official forecast track in 12 hours. This is from the National Hurricane Center. It's actually north of all of these other model tracks that you see spaced out through here. So while the models are indicating more of a westerly track, the National Hurricane Center hasn't really bought into that idea just yet. However, you may see that adjustment at the 10 p.m. advisory, which will happen in about 2.5 hours. But as Rich alluded to, these mountains over southern Cuba, very high. Another thing that could potentially inhibit strengthening from the storm, in fact, it could cause some issues, as Rich said, to the development of the storm in the future. We've got dry air out ahead of this storm. You see all these bright colors here over Hispaniola and the eastern part of the Caribbean Sea, but out ahead of the system, you see this brown shading. And what this is actually satellite data showing how much moisture is in the atmosphere. This is the water vapor data. You see all of this dry air over Alabama and Mississippi, the air incredibly stable here, and the same type of air is in the Central Caribbean here near Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti. So that's yet another thing that will be working against Erika in the coming days. Another thing that I can't show on this particular map, are high wind shear values. In fact, Rich and I were talking off air earlier, and in the days ahead, you're going to see some really strong wind shear high in the atmosphere over the southeastern United States in this region. And that's ultimately what will cause the system to stay in this more central, or I should say, Florida Peninsula region, as opposed to moving west into the central or perhaps western Gulf of Mexico, Rich.
But despite all of that, Spinks, and all of it does not look well for Tropical Storm Erika, despite all of that, the Hurricane Center is still saying that they expect it to be a tropical storm, and they expect it to threaten some part of Florida. In fact, you look at your model behind you there, it goes off of Cuba and reforms as a tropical storm after becoming a depression. What do you think the odds are of that at this moment? It definitely seems likely that the storm will become a depression. What are the odds that it will reform into something stronger in a day or so?
Good question, Rich. Let me step aside here and pull up a map of sea surface temperatures. And so one thing that could work in this storm's favor, and you're actually watching me live, Google this. This is the same type of data that you can see on the internet. One thing that is in the storm's favor, sea surface temperatures. So right now, the water surrounding Erika is some of the warmest water on Earth. Really, you're seeing sea surface temperatures in the neighborhood of 90 degrees. And we'll look at this one. This is not a particularly good representation of the Bahamas or the Northern Caribbean. This is more of a Gulf of Mexico view. But you can see these lighter shades of green, particularly near the coast here, and this warm water near Cuba. If we extrapolate that out, I wish this map would show the Bahamas and the Northern Caribbean, some of the warmest sea surface temperatures on Earth in the neighborhood of 90 degrees, and that is a tropical system's paradise. Now, will that warm water be enough to overcome these other three forces that are working in nature against this storm? Probably not. But as Rich said, we have to keep an eye on even the remnants of Erika due to this very thing, this risk that could reform Erika as it moves towards the Florida Panhandle.
Now, Spinks, while you are mentioning that it is some of the warmest water on Earth there in the Florida Straits, it will not have very much time to develop into anything serious. With that being said, how quickly can storms develop? Is there a timing issue? You would assume obviously there is, but is a few hours, is 12 hours, is 18 hours, is that enough for a storm to develop back into a tropical storm or into something stronger than that even?
Well, the odds are certainly against Erika at that point, Rich. You know, with all these other forces working against the storm, one would logically think that 12 to 18 hours over these warm open waters, if that, likely wouldn't be long enough for the thing to redevelop. However, stranger things have happened. Of course, I think back to 10 years ago right now, you had Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf of Mexico that emerged off the coast of Florida, by the way, as a Category 1 hurricane. And it went from a Category 1 hurricane as it looped to the south and then back to the north, working its way up to a Category 5. Now, obviously, the environmental conditions, much different. This is a totally different ballgame compared to Hurricane Katrina. So that's the good news. But Rich, to answer your question, this thing, of course, could ramp back up to a tropical storm, perhaps a minimal hurricane, but even that at this point, as the National Hurricane Center has been noting, is far-fetched. So good news for our friends in the Florida Panhandle. Really, you know, there's just hardly any chance of this thing ramping up into a major hurricane, for example.
Jeff Masters of Weather Underground said earlier today that even if Tropical Storm Erika weakens, already soggy Tampa and St. Petersburg, further up the coast, obviously, in central Florida, they could get socked with up to 3 to 6 inches of rain. That area is already incredibly soaked with water. South Florida, not so much. South Florida has been close to drought conditions this summer. So, in fact, a few inches of rain may be welcomed in many ways in South Florida. But you look up there, Masters told the Tampa Bay Times, you should look for some of the worst flooding you've seen there over the past 5 years. So this storm, while it may in fact not be anything of substantial velocity and wind speed, it could be quite the rainmaker, even if it's a tropical depression, right, Spinks?
That's exactly right. And as Rich just said, rain from Tropical Storm, or what would have been Tropical Storm Erika at that point, will be falling on very wet ground. On this graphic, this is a look at the state of Florida from Pensacola all the way down to Key West, and this is a live view at the GOES satellite infrared imagery and also radar data from all of our NextRad weather radar sites from across the state. And look at all this. You've got rain falling right now just to the west of Orlando, to the south of Gainesville, rain falling out over the Everglades between Miami and also Fort Myers. So lots of rain happening. There were flash flood warnings in the Kissimmee region earlier today. And as Rich said, with rain falling on already saturated soil, flash flooding and flooding definitely going to be a concern in the coming days with whatever is left of Erika, whether she comes or whether it comes in as a tropical storm, tropical depression. It really doesn't matter. This is going to be a big rainmaker for the state of Florida and ultimately, Rich, even the state of Georgia, the southern part of Georgia and up into South Carolina, going to have a lot of rain from whatever is left of Erika.
Well, absolutely, Spinks. And it's still important to watch this storm. Today, many people were preparing. There were local television crews at various supermarkets in town, people stocking up on food and supplies and water. And although it does seem rather unlikely that we would have a hurricane, and frankly, at this point, even a tropical storm impacting South Florida, still very important to prepare. Spinks, here on our closing minutes of our program here this evening, as it's just past 8:20 Eastern time, a big advisory coming up at 11 p.m., so we'll learn more then. At what time of day and how many hours do you think we'll have a better picture of this? Clearly, that's the new cone, by the way, coming out from this new advisory. And as you can see, it has made a pretty dramatic turn to the west in this new cone. So when do you think, Spinks, we'll have a good feel here in South Florida for what to expect? Or will we even know until it's right on our doorstep?
Rich, I know that I've said this multiple times in the past few days, but I do think once the storm emerges over the Florida Straits here in between Key West and Cuba, that's obviously not a lot of time between quote-unquote landfall and when the storm emerges. However, at that point, we will know with confidence what the storm is going to do and what it will be classified as it moves very near Florida. And as Rich alluded to, the cone has shifted to the west. Why is that? Well, mainly because the center of Erika has really moved to the west. If you'll remember yesterday when we were looking at the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, you had the core of Erika, the cone, really doing something like this. So understand the official track is now on the southern side of yesterday's cone. And that's happened basically over the past 3 days. The storm continues moving to the west at a rapid clip. In fact, you can see here, forward movement has increased to 21 miles per hour. Earlier in the day, you were looking at a storm that was moving to the west, 16, 17 miles per hour, now up to 21 miles per hour. Maximum sustained winds still holding at 45. But as Rich said a moment ago, it really doesn't matter what the thing comes in as over South Florida. This is going to be an abundant rainmaker for much of the Florida peninsula. Showers and storms will be numerous on Sunday, Monday, and even Tuesday. And also one thing to note, look at how much the thing slows down. You see it's moving about, say, 200 miles from 2 p.m. on Monday to 2 p.m. on Wednesday. And right now the thing is racing to the west, moving at 21 miles per hour. That is a very fast forward clip for a tropical cyclone. So it's going to slow down and really inundate with rain portions of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and even North Carolina and Virginia in the coming days, Rich.
Interestingly, though, Spinks, if you look at where, for what it's worth, because it hasn't been worth very much in the past few days, the Weather Service's line, but if you look at it, right now it's looking pretty close to getting near Tampa. And that's where we just spoke about, Tampa having some very rough couple of weeks here in terms of rainfall. If it did get near Tampa, we could have a severe flooding issue in the Tampa-St. Petersburg area. And if that happens, Spinks, this is a big enough storm. It will still be raining here in South Florida. And also explain to our audience on the right side of the storm, as some call the dirty side, how that shakes out for us here in South Florida.
Yeah, what we'll do for that, Rich, we'll go back to our other source, and this is just a classic situation in terms of the old phrase. Most of our viewers at this point probably have never heard this, I would assume, but in terms of hurricanes, the east is the beast and the west is the best. And that's what Rich is implying, the dirty side of tropical cyclones. What's happening here, and often what happens in the Atlantic basin and in the northern hemisphere, you will get southwesterly shear starting to shear the tops off of the thunderstorms, or the cloud tops, I should say, in tropical cyclones. So if you split the difference and draw a line from north to south through the center of the tropical cyclone, what you will find is, in most cases, the eastern flank of the storm, and particularly the northeastern flank, is often the worst in terms of highest wind speeds, greatest rainfall amounts, and that's due to the shear. When the shear blows in from the southwest, it often carries all of this precipitation out to the northeastern quadrant, and that's what's going to happen here. Even as the remnants of Erika move off to the west and ultimately the west-northwest, you're going to see torrential rainfall through the Bahamas. No doubt that it will be raining like cats and dogs in Nassau and Grand Bahama over the next few days. And even as the system works its way into the southeastern United States, you can see these semicircles, and what this represents, that's actually the tropical storm wind fields at the, I believe it's 72-hour point here south of Key West. So this is your northeastern quadrant, and in addition to the strongest winds, that's where the heaviest rain will be falling with Erika. So this would be the 96-hour point, about 4 days out. And if this happens to be correct, it would have the center of Erika, or the remnants of Erika, very near St. Petersburg and Tampa, just south of Tampa Bay. But again, if Erika happens to be a tropical storm at that point, it would have the greatest winds most likely in this northeastern quadrant, just because you've got the shear blowing from the southwest to the northeast. So Rich, that's exactly why you have the east is the beast and the west is the best. It certainly applies in this situation.
Absolutely, Spinks. So we'll end our broadcast here in a couple minutes. In our closing, though, to go back to a question I kind of buried with another question earlier, we're looking for the next 12 hours to be very critical for this storm, because it has to survive Hispaniola. And as we've mentioned before, this cone has shifted so many times in the past few days that it could just as easily shift back to the east. It could dramatically shift to the west. Who knows? So the next few hours are very critical for people watching all over the southeastern United States.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Rich. In fact, let's go ahead and pull up the official forecast. We'll go through that one more time. And as I mentioned a bit ago, we can say at this point with high confidence, this storm will be virtually no threat, it seems, for Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. However, for our friends in Florida and Georgia, and of course, as Rich mentioned, Governor Rick Scott in the state of Florida declared a state of emergency for all 67 counties here in the Sunshine State. That's because regardless of what happens with the classification of Erika, lots of rain going to happen, and as Rich mentioned, if heavy rainfall happens here in the Tampa area, some significant flooding could occur. That's going to be a big deal in the coming days, and you will likely see many headlines talking about flooding in Tampa and perhaps throughout the entirety of the panhandle of Florida. Now, as the thing works north, you could see a heavy rain and flooding threat in places like Charleston, South Carolina, Augusta, Georgia, also Columbia, Charlotte. Cities that are north of the projected path of Erika will have heavy rain likely on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week if the center of Erika survives as a tropical cyclone. But as we've been talking about, there is a strong possibility that the center doesn't survive the mountainous terrain of Hispaniola or perhaps southern Cuba, but heavy rain and moisture are going to be streaming in regardless of the classification in the coming days, Rich.
Well, Spinks, thanks a lot for the work as always. Another good broadcast for you. Hopefully, we won't have to speak to you again during this tropical storm watching period. But if we do, we'll be sure to broadcast it here. So, Spinks Megginson, thanks again for your efforts this evening.
All right, and thank you, Rich. Of course, Rich is in Miami, Florida, in the definitely in the cone. So we will certainly be watching with open eyes and open ears to not only watch for Rich, but watch for the millions of South Floridians as Erika approaches from the southeast.
Very good, Spinks. We appreciate it. Again, you can follow Spinks Megginson on Twitter at RZWeather. You can also go visit his website, Red Zone Weather, at rzweather.com. You can follow Rise Miami News at, well, this is easy, risemiaminews.com, and also on Twitter at Rise Miami News. I'm Rich Robinson of Rise Miami News, signing off for Spinks Megginson. Thanks for joining us on our broadcast. Be sure to remain weather aware.